Hashem, today's parsha discussion is Parshas Korach, and what I'd like to do primarily is the first verse of Korach, just the first pasuk today. We'll see if we'll have time to get through just the first pasuk. Actually, ironically, the first pasuk does appear in in today's Daf Yomi, because it says that God says to Moshe, you can return from Midian. He says you can return because all the people who tried to seek your death are now dead. And who are those people? Those people, Talmud says, were Dasan and Aviram. And Dasan and Aviram appear in this week's portion, the very first verse. Korach, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kaas, ben Levi, and Dasan and Aviram, b'nei Eliav, and Om ben Pelas, b'nei Ruvain. So they're the ones who took Korach's side. So the question is, how could it, the Talmud says it, how can it say Dasan and Aviram are dead when we know that they're alive? Here, I'll read to you the actual text. It says, how can it say that they're dead when we know that they're alive? Says the Talmud. So the Talmud says, what does it mean? It means that they're poor, because poor is an example of death. Who are these people who are dead? It says that these people are Dasan and Viram. Did they really die? They were alive. They lost their money, so therefore they're considered to be like they're dead. So if somebody loses their money, Dasan and Aviram became poor. And how do we know that the people who Moshe saw striking one another were Dasan and Aviram? Because the verse says that Moshe went out on the second day and he saw two Hebrew men who were striking each other, and he said to the wicked one, "Why are you striking the fellow Jew?" So the word that means strike, that the word that says is there are two Hebrews who were fighting, and Rashi tells us wherever it says the word nitzim or nitzavim, that refers to Datan and Aviram. And so even though the Torah doesn't mention who these two men were who were fighting with each other in Exodus, the Gemara in Nidarim 64b says that they were the ones that was Dasan and Aviram. They're the ones who told Paro that it was Moshe who killed the Egyptian the day before. And so Moshe had to run away because of them. But now these people became poor. The Talmud tells us here in Tractate Avodah Zarah that they became poor. That Dasan and Aviram are considered like they are dead because they're poor. From here we see that if a person has lost all their money, the Talmud says we're going to consider them as though they're dead. Why? Because they're limited in their ability to impact the world. If you have money, it's easier, supposedly, to make an impact. So I hold on, I want to say something about this. I just want to first see. So I was thinking about this a lot because we think that Dasan and Aviram were finished. Moshe came back, and these people, it says they were dead. That these two people, these wicked ones, it's like they were dead because they lost all their money. And so as a consequence of this, Moshe Rabbeinu was victorious. He was the leader. He was the ruler. But you see, sometimes you think you defeat people, you think you defeat an enemy, but they're never really dead. They come back. And like we see this, like we thought we defeated the Nazis, they're coming back. You think you defeat someone, they come back. And that's what I was thinking. Tosfos says, how do we know that when it says in the text of the Torah that all the people who tried to kill you are dead? How do we know that's a reference to Datan and Aviram? Maybe it's the pashtus, the simple explanation of the verse is really a reference to to Paro. That Paro is the one. So, and also not only that, Datan and Aviram are basically therefore in these three main incidents. They're the incident of Korach, but they're also the ones who left over the man, and also they're the ones who here were the ones who tattled on Moshe to Pharaoh or informed on Moses to Pharaoh. Tosfos says, how do we know that it's Datan Aviram? How do we know that they lost their money? How do we know that they did something else to be considered like they were dead? The Talmud has other categories. So the Gemara answers, so Tosfos answers, it's most logical to assume that that was the reason because they came back with a full force. So that's what Tosfos says. Anyway, I guess we learn from here that the adversaries of Moshe, that's what the basic idea of this midrash is, that the adversaries of Moshe had a history with him. Korach, we don't exactly know his history, but Korach wanted, and we'll see from today the midrash will tell us different theories as to how and why Korach wanted to assume, why he took up the fight against Moshe. But one thing he did is he went and he took his fight with the other people who also had a previous grievance with Moshe. And he found these previous grievances, and that's how he was able to rally up the crowd. So what I'd like to do is just look at this first verse, which talks about where Korach came from, the source of his rebellion. And if we have time, I want to look at the Rashi on this first verse, and then after we look at the Rashi on this first verse, then I want to look at the Talmudic text on it, then the Midrashim. If we have time, we'll get to Rabbi Soloveitchik on it. I just want to do the first verse with everybody today. So we read the first verse, and the Rashi on it is the following. The first Rashi states that this passage is expounded very well in the Tanchuma. So hopefully we'll get to the Tanchuma of the ancient Midrash, so hopefully we'll get to it. So what does it mean, Vayikach Korach? Where did Korach take? What did he take? He didn't take anything, because it says we keep waiting for the cause. Korach took. What did he take? So Rashi says Rashi gives two explanations. One explanation is he took himself out of the picture. He took himself out of the community. He took himself to raise a challenge to the kahuna. He didn't like the fact that Moshe had designated his brother as to be the Kohen Gadol. Yesterday we saw in the Talmud that Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim taught the following message. He said, pray for the welfare of the kingdom, because we're not for the kingdom, we're not for government. Everybody would swallow each other. Man would swallow up each other alive. So the commentaries point out that this was a teaching that was made by Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim, the deputy to the Kohanim. Why does it say he's the deputy to the Kohanim? It should say he's the deputy to the Kohen, or the deputy to the Kohen Gadol. Why does he deputy to the Kohanim? So some want to say that he reckoned that he was the servant, he was the number two during a time where he kept getting passed over for the high position of the high priest by other people who were really not worthy. There was a period of time where the Kohen Gadol was not worthy, was not selected on the basis of merit, selected on the basis of his proximity to authority, proximity to the king. He had wealth, he had other connections. And so he could have been, this person could have been, he could have been very bitter about it and blamed the government and been upset and tried to destroy the government. But instead, he said, pray for the welfare of the government, because we're not for the government, people will be swallowed alive. And this is the opposite of Korach. So Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim, even though he got passed over for the Kohen Gadol by the nepotism, he still respected the system. Whereas Korach, even though we know Moshe Rabbeinu picked Aaron because God told him to, Korach challenged the whole system. And he said that he wants to break the whole system because he wasn't selected. People who feel like just because they're not selected, they want to break the whole system. That's the first approach that Rashi says. What does it mean Korach took? Korach took himself out of the system and he wanted to destroy the whole system. A second theory that Rashi has is what does it mean Korach took? Korach took 250. He took the heads of the Sanhedrin and he took them with words. He says he convinced them. He sold them. He was a person who was able to convince people to follow him because he told them what they wanted to hear. And so he was able to convince them and take them to his side. So those are the two opinions from Rashi as to what Korach took. Either it means that Korach took himself out of the community and caused strife, or else it means that Korach took people with his powerful speech, and he was able to convince people to follow him. Unlike Moshe Rabbeinu, who says, "I'm not a man of words," Korach was clearly a man of words. As it states, the word Rashi cites, "Kachui machem devarim." As he cites the verse, "Take with you words." So Korach took them with words. Those are the first two Rashis about what did Korach take. Then it says his name is Ben Yitzhar Ben Kahas Ben Levi. And Rashi points out that Korach does not mention, it says the Korach was the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kahas, the son of Levi, but it does not mention the son of Jacob. Why doesn't it mention the son of Jacob? Because Jacob specifically requested that he does not want his name to be mentioned with Korach. Where does he say that? He says that when he gives the blessings to Shimon and Levi, when he blesses Levi, he says, with your congregation, do not join my honor, which means that Jacob, through prophecy, saw that there was going to be a rebellion. And he said, don't, leave my name out of it. Stop. So it stopped at Levi and didn't go one back. But where is Jacob's name mentioned with respect to Korach? When they come to talk about the service of the Levites that they're going to give the song that they're going to sing as an accompaniment to the service. And there it states in the book of Chronicles, Ben Evyasaph, Ben Korach, Ben Yitzhar, Ben Kahas, Ben Levi. It says that his name is the son of Evyasaph, the son of Korach, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kahas, the son of Levi, Ben Yisrael, the son of Israel. So there, when it comes to the lineage of the Levites, when it comes to singing in the temple, there it does mention them. But here it doesn't mention, because Jacob specifically requested that his name not be mentioned. Then Rashi discusses, why does it say V'datan v'aviram? And so how did Datan v'aviram connect with Korach? What's the connection? They have nothing to do with them. They have two totally separate arguments. Korach is saying, I should be the Kohen. And Datan and Aviram, they never liked Moshe to begin with. They always rejected Moshe's authority. They never accepted him. They didn't accept the man. And Korach doesn't seem to be arguing with Moshe. He seems to be only arguing with Aaron. He's saying, you're taking too much power. We need to have checks and balances, or we need to at least divide it up. But here, Datan and Aviram never accepted Moshe. So what was the relationship between Datan and Aviram and Korach? How did they connect? So Rashi says that it was just geography, that they just happened to meet each other. They just happened to be living next door to each other, and that's how they connected. In my mind, it's a little bit of a forced, but that's what Rashi says. Rashi says, "B'shvil shayasheva Ruvain sharoi v'chaniatam teimana," because tribe of Ruvain was resting on the south when they camped, and they were a neighbor to Kahas and his children, who also camped on the south. So that's how, since they were neighbors, Korach joined together with Dasan and Aviram. And from here we learn a very important concept. If your next door neighbor is wicked, it's bad news for you. It's bad news. And so that's what happens. The two wicked, that when Korach was next to Dathan and Aviram, some of the wickedness rubbed off. But now Rashi asked the question. The fundamental question, according to Rashi, is where is Korach's? Rashi asks him, Mara Korach achok Moshe. Why does Korach fight with Moses? What did he see that led him to fight with Moses? So it says, Niskanel Nisiyoso Shel Elitzephan ben Uziel. He was jealous of the fact that Elitzephan was made to be the Nasi of the tribe of Levi. The tribe of Levi. Elitzephan, the son of Uziel. That Moshe appointed him Nasi over the sons of Kahas. Korach was the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kahas. So Levi had 4 sons. One of them was Kahas. So Korach said, my father had 4 sons. As it says, Uvenei Kahas, the children of Kahas, were Amram, Yitzhar, Hebron, and Amram, Yitzhar, Hebron, and Uziel. So therefore, for this reason, he was figuring, he said that since Korach was the son of Yitzhar, and Amram was the one from whom Moshe came, Moshe and Aaron came from Amram, but the Nasi should come from the next one down, who's Yitzhar. Amram Abachor, Natu Shnei B'nav Gedula. So Amram, the firstborn, his 2 children became Moses and Aaron. So who should take the next honor, which is to be the Nasi, the prince of the tribe? Should it be me? Because I'm the son of Yitzhar, who's second to Amram. But rather, he appointed the son of Uziel, Elitzaphan, the son of Uziel, to be the Nasi. And that was the youngest one. So he says, I'm going to argue with him and cancel out his words. So the first approach is Korach was upset that he was passed over. Excuse me, he was passed over. So it's just basic petty jealousy or that he was passed over for the job he wanted. And that's the reason why he stirred up all this trouble. So what did he do? I mentioned this last night. I'm reading this tremendous book that I highly recommend, The Aguna by Chaim Grada. I don't know if anybody here has read it, but I'm reading it. Has anybody here read it? So it's, you read it, Aya? So it reminds me exactly of Korach. It's about these people who have their own petty squabbles. And rather than deal with them in a mature manner, or even deal with them straight on, they get the whole community to rally against a poor rabbi who his major sin was nothing other than he allowed a woman who was an aguna, he found a way for her to remarry. So since they actually literally had nothing against this rabbi, but all they did was stir up people and through other previous grievances. And that's what Korach did. What did Korach do? He made up, because he had this petty grievance, he thought that he was passed over for a promotion, basically. So what did he do? He got other people to join with him and to pretend he was fighting for something so much bigger than what he was really fighting for. What did he do? He stood up and he gathered together 250 heads of court. Most of them were from the tribes of Reuven, his neighbors. What else was Reuven? Reuven was the firstborn. So Reuven also felt he got passed over. So he took these 250 men, and they were Elitzur, son of Shteyur, and his friends. And Vikayotzibo. And he took the princes and the 250 people and the princes, including the princes and the people from the tribe of Reuven. And he says, these are the ones who are Kriyei Ha'edah. These are the ones who have been summoned. These are the ones, and he what did Korach do? He put them in talitot. He put them in garments which were entirely made of tchelas. At the end of last week's portion, we learned that you have to wear tzitzis, and the tzitzis are fringes that you put on a garment, and at the corner of the fringes is a thread of tchelas. Tchelas is the royal purple, which was worn only by the Kohanim, or as part of the sacred service, serving Hashem with its tzitzis. So it was a very precious clothing. So they came and they stood before Moshe. So he made the entire garment out of tcheles. And they said to Moshe, this talus, which is entirely made of tcheles, do we have to put tzitzis on it? Or is it exempt? So Moshe said to them, obligated. So they began to laugh at him. And they said, is it possible that a talus of a different type of cloth, one string of tzitzis, will exempt it? One string of tcheles will exempt it. Now that the entire garment is made out of tcheles, shouldn't it exempt itself? And so they made fun of Moshe about this law that he taught them about tzitzis and tcheles. Rashi does not quote the rest of the midrash, which is that they then asked him if there's an entire room filled with Sifrei Torah, does the room still require a mezuzah on the doorpost? And Rashi said, yes, of course it does. And they again laughed and they said, if the mezuzah exempts an entire room and the mezuzah is only 2 paragraphs of the Torah, if the entire Torah is there, for sure it should exempt them. And so they laughed at Moshe about that as well. I know I said I wanted to, I know that I said I wanted to first read after the, I wanted to first read the entire Gemaras on it and the Midrash and then come to Rabbi Soloveitchik, but there's something I just can't get out of my mind about Rabbi Soloveitchik in this week's parasha about what we just read that I wanted to read it to you. Rabbi Soloveitchik has something that he calls the common sense rebellion. What's the common sense rebellion? Here. Let me see here. This is what Rabbi Soloveitchik writes. So let me explain to you what Rashi says here, what Rabbi Soloveitchik says. He comments on this Rashi. He says the following. Rashi offers 2 explanations of the phrase that Korach took. Okay, so you heard my commentary, but now let's do what Rabbi Soloveitchik said. The first thing is he took himself on one side with the intention of separating himself from the community so they can raise a protest about the kahuna. Korach was the first to separate himself from a community which was committed to Moses and revered him. The rest of the community, even though they had complained, they never made it about Moshe. Korach was the first one to raise the argument against Moshe. Rashi's phrase is "lakachat etzmo." Says that Korach dedicated himself completely to the task. He had this passionate hatred. There was only one goal in Korach's life, to unseat Moses. He dedicated his whole self to this diabolical plan of undermining Moses' position within the community. That's what Korach is. Korach lakachat atzmo. He had this maniacal hatred of Moshe as the leader, and he dedicated himself to that task. So Rabbi Soloveitchik points out that the Korach rebellion, it wasn't the only rebellion, obviously, in the Torah, but it was unique because before it, people complained, they protest, they whined, but it was always in response to a physical need, a biological pressure, a primitive fear of an enemy, Amalek, serpents, or the wilderness. There were no political disagreements with Moshe, no ideological controversies, no rebellions. There were protests, complaints, quarrels, consequences of discomfort and hardship. They wanted water and food. They were afraid, they protested. Even the golden calf episode was not made by idolatrous ideas that corroded the moral fiber of the people and influenced their philosophy. It was caused by instinctual horror that befalls a lost sheep in wide open spaces. A spontaneous reaction to the primordial terror of being lost, leaderless in the wilderness. They thought Moshe wouldn't return, and without Moshe, how are they going to survive? The golden calf happened because they were afraid Moshe was gone. But this is not like the rebellion of Korach. The rebellion of Korach wasn't a spontaneous rebellion, which happened because there was a fear or an anxiety. It was just the opposite. That all the previous quarrels were unorganized, unplanned, spontaneous reactions. The quarrels were generated by a mob mentality. When it's a mob, it easily gets excited, but it also easily regains its equilibrium. But Korach's rebellion was a planned rebellion, which was strategic. He planned it out. He thought, he did a poll, he did surveys to see which arguments would test well with the public that he wanted to influence. That's the first, and he did this with a maniacal, malevolent desire to hurt Moshe. The second explanation of what Korach did, Rashi says, the first thing is he took himself away from the community to cause Moshe to attack Moshe. The second explanation is that Korach took others with him. In the beginning, he took 250 leaders with him. In the beginning, he didn't tell anything to his co-conspirators. At first, he didn't say anything, but when it became clear that the Jews were going to be spending 40 years in the wilderness, he revealed his plan to Datan, Aviram, and others. Rashi says, Mashach Rasfei Sanhedrios Shebahem Bedvarim. He attracted the heads of the courts with words. By using clever and intelligent words, he began to conspire to criticize Moses, to attack and ridicule. He used all the weapons. In conversation with some, he was serious. With others, he was humorous. With some, he was a prosecutor. With others, he was a champion of justice. Nachmanides says that Korach appealed to the tribe of the firstborn who bore a grudge against Moshe because they felt that they should be the priests. So, hold on one second. Right, so thank you, Wendy, because that's like what Rabbi Soloveitchik is saying. But Rabbi, I thought when I took this Chumash off of the book, the Rabbi Soloveitchik Chumash, I thought he would say what I said, what I read. I thought it would include that which I once read from him, but for some reason he doesn't have it here. That he calls, there's an article where he calls the rebellion of Korach the common sense rebellion. He's saying it just doesn't make sense. He was attacking it through sophistry. He said this idea of the tchelas, it doesn't make sense that you have to wear a pair of fringes on your garment. Oh, here it is. It's not where it is. The survivors of the catastrophe which befell Korach's group later conceded that Moshe is true. Moshe emes v'saraso emes. Anachnu badaim, and we are liars. The Gemara Bava Basra 74a says that. This judgment is still valid. Common sense can only spread confusion and havoc when applied to halacha, as it does with all specialized disciplines. This is what he writes. When people talk of a meaningful halacha, of unfreezing the halacha, or of an empirical halacha, they are basically proposing Korach's approach. So, okay, this is going to be hurtful to some people, but Rabbi Soloveitchik says people say, "Oh, halacha is not meaningful. It's it's frozen in time. First of all, it's not true, both of those points, but even if they were, it wouldn't change anything. Halacha is not supposed to make common sense. And that's what the Korach was arguing. He was saying it doesn't make sense, these mitzvahs of the Korach. And Moshe was saying that's not the point of it. The point of it is not to be something that's more meaningful, etc. The point of it is the they were using common sense to explain halachic ideology. And Rabbi Soloveitchik said they apply common sense reasoning, which is replete with platitudes and cliches. So this is what he writes. If one fulfills the mitzvah of tzitzis, recognizing its religious meaning, then a glance at one blue thread will produce an awareness of God. To this day, the tallis is religiously inspiring to the worshiping Jew. Such is the power of the mitzvah, proceeding from action to feeling. The blue color can remind one of his link with God. However, if one fails to conform to Allah norms, instead of veiling himself with common sense, substitutes a garment that is entirely blue, his response will be divested of its religious meaning. So what Korach tried to do was to take common sense application and apply it to halacha. And what he didn't realize, as Rabbi Soloveitchik, is that in doing so, you took all the meaning away from it. And that Korach's response, therefore, became a hedonistic experience, aesthetic appreciation, but not a religious emotion. Okay, now is the part where I'm going to criticize, which I don't like to do. But you see that a lot of the streams of Judaism that went away from a strict adherence to halacha, to Jewish law, this is what they did. They took a common sense approach to halacha, and as a consequence, it became aesthetic appreciation rather than a religious emotion. That's the criticism of those approaches. And in a sense, what Rabbi Soloveitchik is saying, he's comparing that with Korach. He's saying Korach, now he's not saying that this is the main thing of Korach, he's saying that this is one of the arguments that Korach used to appeal to people. Remember, Korach used every trick in his bag to try and appeal to people. He was just looking for anything. So to some people, he promised them power. To some people, he promised them money. But to other people, he promised them, he's saying, I'm going to give you something that makes more sense. Your approach to halacha doesn't make sense. I'm going to update halacha. I'm going to make halacha for the modern world, for the 21st century. We're going to make it more modern, something that's more sensitive. We're going to unfreeze it. But in doing so, he went away. He just appealed to common sense. But halacha is not about common sense. Halacha is about following God's will. And if you take it and if you move it from that, then you're going to have big problems. Let me pause here, see if anybody has any reactions to that.